Hello, welcome back to the Off the Record podcast. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's not even started yet, but this is my favourite podcast of all time. If you are just listening to this, I urge you to go and watch it on YouTube because we are in IMS. We are at IMS in Ibiza at the wonderful Hyde Hotel.
And Mondrian, yeah. It's stunning, isn't it?
I mean, look at this backdrop.
The sun's out.
Please go and watch
it. It's the first time. You know, we're used to recording the podcast in this little dungeon of a studio with no natural light. So this is the opposite, and it's great.
It is unbelievable out here. Basically, you got two hotels together, and the way it's structured is it kind of kicks off around 11 a.m. until like 6 p.m. And there is, let's say, there's like 7 or 8 different areas. You've got keynote speakers, all industry makers from agents, artists, managers. You've got it's kind of a fitness wellness area where you can come and do yoga in the morning, breath work. Yeah. Then obviously there's the parties later. We're going to one tonight. But it is amazing. First thing I want to say is a lot of people who listen to this podcast have been out here and said hello. So first of all, to the people that are in Ibiza that have seen us, if you are watching this, hello. It's been great to meet a lot of familiar faces, some students, some people that just consume this podcast, and this podcast seems to be very popular with people here, a lot of industry heads.
Yeah, so thank you for that.
Who, I guess, consume this sort of medium as opposed to, a quick TikTok of ours. Yeah, it's been amazing to get face-to-face with some of you listeners. And yeah, like I say, if you are driving, pause it, get home and watch it, because this is some special backdrop. What we want to talk about is, we've been to a few keynotes today and yesterday. This is day 2. And there was a big report that's come out called the IMS Industry Report.
That's right, yeah. And there's a lot of data going on with it, but the good thing is what it does is it gives us a pulse around what is going on in the wider electronic music industry. So it's very much a report around electronic music as a whole. So we're sort of excluding hip hop and rock and things like that. We're looking at just the dance electronic music industry, but it looks at everything within there, from live acts to streaming to
emerging markets.
Exactly that. Yeah. So there's kind of like 8 or 9 points that this report condenses down to, which we're going to share with you so that you understand where the opportunities may lie in your DJ career, in your career as an artist, where you want to take your career. And there might be some stuff from this report that you find useful. We've kind of condensed it down. So shall I just get stuck into some of these?
Let's get stuck into,
topics?
like you say, if you are into electronic music, there is some absolutely amazing insights in here for you. And shout out to Mark, who put this together and who gave a great keynote talk, giving all this data away. Let's start off with number 1.
So I'm going to do it in a slightly different order, but number 1. I'm going to give you a quote from it first. The quote is: drum and bass and jungle ranked number 2 for new releases and number 3 for catalogue on Beatport in 2024. Afro House shot from 23rd to 4th in producer searches on Loopmasters. So this is basically saying, and there's a big part of this report that's saying, drum and bass, jungle, Afro House, and also UKG and Speed Garage are up by massive percents in popularity as genres, which we're seeing. But you know what, UKG was a bit of a surprise for me in just how much it had grown, which is obviously good for us from the UK. So
yeah, I mean, if you follow this podcast, you know how much me and Jamie love UK music in general, but especially UK garage and drum and bass. And I guess it's not surprising, it's just really, I guess, fulfilling for us who have loved the music for so long. And interestingly, we've had a chat with a guy called Chris Goss. He is the head of Hospital Records out here. He's a founder of drum and bass, and I guess one of the pioneers of basically one of the biggest labels in drum and bass music. And we was able to have a bit of a chat with him about how it's emerged. It's a lot to do with the US picking it up, North America picking it up really heavily, but in countries like Netherlands, where the rise of it has just been exponential. I think he mentioned France a little bit as well. So the rise isn't surprising, but it is really exciting for us. We've put a lot of education into drum and bass, especially over the last few years. We did a drum and bass course, obviously, and it's exciting. I think
it is.
Amazing.
But it just means if you've got any interest in those genres, now's your time to double down on it. It doesn't mean other genres have gone anywhere. It just means that there is an increased popularity in those ones. And leaning off the back of that, another of the points was that SoundCloud is a cultural hub again. So there's a lot of talk about culture within the industry and stuff. But what does this mean? Like, to boil this down, the quote was, SoundCloud is growing its role as a cultural catalyst. Nearly half of all SoundCloud plays are for tracks up to 18 months old. So half of the plays on SoundCloud are for tracks that are like newly uploaded, not back catalogue, like newly uploaded, which is crazy to think how much is on there. But so what does that mean?
Half of the new plays in the last 18 months of new music is listened to by 50% of the people on there.
Yeah.
That's
so it means
crazy.
that you should be on there if you're.
Yeah, if you're trying
to
make it.
What it means for DJs is we should be uploading bootlegs, edits, re-edits, remixes, trying to get into that scene of, okay, what can I do to play with music and how can I share this like unique version of this song, because SoundCloud is a hub for all of that music, and it's obviously the algorithm leans towards people uploading new stuff there.
Definitely. And look, we're DJs, right? If you are into electronic music, you're probably getting a large percentage of your music from SoundCloud. And it's so funny, you know, James, who's with us today, our COO, he went to one of the talks here with Judge Jules, and they were talking about, was it like music royalties and things like that? And we was having a bit of a discussion over lunch about SoundCloud and this like enigma they have over the industry of, everyone accepts that you can sort of upload bootlegs and edits to SoundCloud, and it's just like part of the culture, it's part of the industry. Whereas, you know, you've got Apple Music and streamers in the DJ industry saying, you know, you can't use stems. We don't want you to use stems, and we don't want you to experiment in this way with music. Whereas SoundCloud just lives in this world. It's almost like the Bermuda Triangle of music, where you can. It's just a free for all. You know, they have the technology to be able to say what this track is mixed with and say what that track's mixed with, and then pay the artist. But I think like everyone just accepts that that needs to exist, and we're just going to let it exist there.
And going back to, if you are an artist, what they were trying to get across in this report is that stop focusing on trying to get millions of Spotify plays, because that algorithm is too hard to break and it's too controlled by Spotify and the major labels. What you want to do is get lots of plays on SoundCloud, and that will grow your audience.
Sick.
And then your next step is to try and tackle Spotify and your major streaming platforms. So that was kind of the key takeaway there.
And I guess, like, you know, a lot of our listeners out there are maybe just specific DJs, or maybe you're making your own edits. It similarly applies, because you are sort of contributing to the wider selection of music. Obviously, the vast majority of players over the last 18 months, the percentage of bootlegs and edits of there is going to be probably pretty high. So, you know, keep contributing. It's only growing bigger and bigger. And when you come to places like this, you sort of understand the power that SoundCloud has in creating and blowing up tastemakers and artists.
Yeah, which leads on to the fact that electronic music added a gross total of 566 million fans, which was ahead of rock. Wow. So there was more new fans to electronic music than there were of rock, which shows how popular the genre is becoming in like the mainstream of the world. You know, it's not just a niche anymore, it is a mainstream.
This is interesting, because again, we've had a couple of conversations with owners or operators of big festivals out here, and there was a little bit in the talk about how festival tickets prices are growing quite exponentially, and it might be like this pivot point of, is it too expensive? But we've seen, and we've talked about on the podcast before, where the rise of electronic artists headlining mainstream festivals has gone up to like 36%. And it's to do with popularity, one, in music. It's all to do with mechanics and how it becomes less expensive to put a DJ on a stage than it does to put on AC/DC. Because, you know, they come with... And I'm sort of speaking generally, you know, a DJ rocks up with a USB. I appreciate that there's screens and shows and there's a team.
Just that, but I
appreciate that. But fundamentally and logistics-wise, there's also a very weighted aspect of festivals being able to remove some overheads and a bit of headache in setup and things like that, to be able to break these artists and give them a platform.
Just off the back of that point, one of the big things was the live scene is strong but saturation is real, and it basically saying that higher ticket prices were the main driver of growth in revenue for the electronic music industry rather than the volume of tickets sold. So what that means is not as many people are going out, but the people that are going out are having to spend more money, and so it has seen growth, but it's getting to a tipping point like you just mentioned. So what does this mean for up-and-coming DJs? You know, it's basically pushing the gap between what's accessible as a gig, right, so too high for new DJs. So the kind of takeaway from this part of the report was that if you're trying to break through, you want to focus on creating your community events. You want to build your local community and put on, good events, shows with those people first, and not try to straight away make it to festival stage, because that's going to get saturated to a point where it's going to be unattainable for the normal follower of yours.
Interesting.
Until you become a superstar, you're not going to be on those lineups unless something drastic changes with the economy of ticket prices.
Sorry to interrupt, I just need a quick favour. Someone in our team just showed me that over 80% of our audience who listen to the Off The Record podcast are not even subscribed. If you are an avid listener, you know we've had some big guests on, and it would make the world of difference if you can subscribe to this podcast. It helps us get better guests, it helps the production level go up, and all around just supports the podcast. So if you could subscribe to this podcast, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. That's interesting. I just want to segue, and I'm just going to get the name up because I want to give her a shout out. It makes sense because, again, we've talked a lot about creating your own fan base and creating your own economy. So you don't really have to rely on other people. If you've got 100 fans, 200 fans, it carries a lot of weight, right? And I want to shout out a DJ who we followed around lockdown. I need to get her name up. We followed her around lockdown. She is DJ Lex, and we followed her. She had 200 followers, mixing old school R&B, and it's gone on, and I've watched her journey for the last 3 years, and she moved on to doing those DJ sets where there's loads of her friends behind her, and she's mixing old school R&B, and they're getting the reactions, and she's grown to a following of over 200,000 on Instagram. And yesterday she just posted a collab post with Will Smith, mixing Will Smith's tracks. So it plays into that what were you mentioning about building an audience for yourself, like your own audience.
Yeah, and this report, it says that dance fans over-index most for wanting spaces where they can be themselves, connect in real life, and enjoy shared activities. So again, building that small community space where you're playing some tunes and you've got your friends dancing, and maybe it's in your local bar, your local cafe, your local park, whatever it is. And that's where you start to build these micro scenes and the collectives, and that then turns into branded events. And the best thing about all of that is you then have storytelling that you can attach to that, because you can, document your journey just like this girl did, of going from in lockdown, just posting some stuff online, to then collabing with Will Smith. What a journey is that?
But yeah, community is a big thing, and there's a bit of a bingo at these kind of events where you're listening for the same trigger words. Everyone talks about authenticity, community, sustainability, and it goes over and over again. But the community one's a big one, and look where we are at the minute. This is grown off the back of being able to come and get face to face with people. And I know it's obviously a bit of a different scene. We're trying to connect with industry, but again, we're trying to create a community around what we do and what we love as a passion, which is educating.
And I think another thing is, if you are up and coming and starting to make your own music and trying to become an artist, off the back of this report, is that you want to start building that community, but creating direct sales. Try and just sell some of your music direct, or some merch, or build a brand around it. Create an email list, because what's happening is that streaming's growing, but the system's shifting, and there's been this disparity between where there's thresholds now coming. If you don't get over a certain amount of streams on these major platforms, you don't get paid out for it. So that's the goal shouldn't be there at the start, and it goes back to the reinforcement of using SoundCloud, but also goes back to this reinforcement of not actually having the streaming platforms as your ultimate destination. It's the communities that the labels want to see you building.
A label is
the TikTok following. It's literally has this person got genuine fans that follow them and appreciate their music, and have they done that off their own back? And that's what we want to see, is people harnessing that.
Interesting. I when we spoke to Will Clark a few weeks ago on the podcast, he mentioned that label now, the way a label operates is totally different how it used to. If you're trying to break it as an artist, a label is essentially like a community. Artists start labels all the time, and it's basically a way to say, I've created a base of people, a community. So why would I need to go and release a record under another label to sell to my community? The people who are going to buy it are fans of mine already. So why don't I release it through my own label and back end it, sort of thing?
So I'm just going to get to a totally different point, which is a very important point, and one of the biggest themes, again, from this report and from people that we've been speaking to in the industry, is that the women in DJing, right?
Yes.
We're seeing more and more women in DJing, but actually the figures are showing that the registered user base of Alpha Theta's products points to a steady rise, but it's only by a couple of percent over the year before, like not a huge jump, and it's still a very steady rise. I think it was only like 17% or
17%, which is about 2 or 3% up on last year, I think, something like that.
And one of the big initiatives that Alpha Theta as a product manufacturer are trying to do is to showcase and bring in more female DJs and champion them more. I know they did a segment recently on mother
female
producer DJs. And it's something that, you know, they see. I just want to shout out to the females, like, they do see you out there. They want to champion you. Like, put the content out. Don't be afraid of putting the content out. We know that there's stigma that gets attached to females putting content out sometimes, and because it's a male-dominated industry. But just know that the industry is behind you when you put your content out. Don't listen to any comments. The wider industry wants to champion
and we're behind you. You know, we've got an incredible team behind Crossfader, and we actively seek out good, you know, creators and good DJs in the space, and that is not your, you know, Emily Lenz at the top of the charts. We are students of ours, fans of ours, and just, you know, people coming into the space. Coming into the space, we're reaching out behind the scenes and supporting females' journeys, and we really want to push that. And we had a meeting with Alpha Theta today, and hopefully we're going to collab in the Q4 on that as well. So it's a good point.
And then the last big point was basically how much it's worth. So the global electronic music industry grew by 6% in 2024 to reach $12.9 billion. So it's growth, and it's continued to grow over the last 5 years. There's not been a decline, but it's steadying slightly.
One real good point that I didn't write down, but stuck with me was the emerging market side of the electronic music scene. You know, the Mark who put the report together mentioned that, like, in, you know, places like India, you know, sort of 10, 15 years ago, before the digital age and social media, if you wanted to be a music producer, you know, in electronic music, there was just really sort of no direct path for you to consume or to make a career for yourself. Now that barrier's a lot lower, and, you know, you can get on a streaming service for, you know, relatively inexpensive. The boom in the emerging markets is flying in you know, South America, Latin America, India.
80% of streaming subscriber growth came from the global south in 2024. So that means the influence is shifting away from traditional Western powerhouses. So
80% of the growth is
Latin America,
crazy, by
South
the way.
Africa, even India. Those kind of markets are actually dominating the growth in the electronic music scene, and it's their time to really shine. The only flip side of that is that the average like revenue per user on these platforms like Spotify is much lower.
It makes sense.
Because of the economy.
Because of the economy, right? And the markets that are emerging maybe have less GDP.
But there's a knock-on effect whereby there's less revenue that goes to the labels then. Even though there's major growth, there's still not as much growth in the revenue. You know, Spotify see this 80% growth or whatever, but there's not 80% growth in the revenue that's going to the artists, and there's a bit of disparity there. So there's something that's sort of been addressed within this report, which was quite interesting.
We went to a talk yesterday which was all about music curation, and the VP of Beatport was there, and it was interesting to hear about his role and how such a big player in the electronic music scene operates. And essentially, you know, the VP is in charge of managing the people who pick the music on the platform, which is obviously a big responsibility. But it's very interesting how they sort of do it. Let's say I think they've just got someone in their team who is now doing, like, South African music, for example. What they do is they go to South Africa, spend some time there, figure out who the main DJ is, who's doing 7 nights a week, who has a community, who produces music, who has connections to everybody, and then they hire that guy. So it's not like an algorithm saying, let's see how many people listen to this track, and then we'll boost that one. The way they curate their pages, it's really good to see the in-depth detail and that authentic angle of being like, we can't fake this. You know, we can't just hope an algorithm will suggest good South African songs to people who want to see it. We need the guy or the girl who is that person, which was quite an interesting part of it.
So that was a report that kind of covered where the industry's going, what the key points that some of the key industry figures are looking at, what's affecting the industry and pushing it in a certain direction. So it's just something, you know, take what you will from that. There's definitely some points that you can pull out of that if you're just a up-and-coming DJ, a beginner DJ. What else is going on here?
So we've been to a few talks. One really inspiring talk we went to was a guy called Elijah, which I guess if he's one of those, if you know, you know, kind of. He's a, I mean, producer, radio, MC, writer, blogger.
Yeah.
he's a
creative.
multifaceted creative, and he used to do these Yellow Square posts with aimed at the sort of wider DJ community, and he came and gave a great talk.
He's got a book.
He's got a book.
Close the app, make the ting.
Close the app, make the ting, and they're basically little messages on yellow squares that make you think about the wider music industry. And yeah, I thought it was really inspiring. He spoke really good.
The main one was, his DJ post where he's basically had this yellow square. He's wrote the letters DJ in the middle of it, but then sprouting off DJ is marketer, curator, playlister, videographer, event organizer, all these other things that basically what is a DJ, and he's challenging that idea of like we kind of get stuck in this idea that a DJ should be just someone that mixes music and gets paid to mix music, but actually a DJ is much more than that, and we've spoken about this a lot on the podcast,
and he was coming at it from an angle of a lot of people don't want it to be that, which we obviously know, but then it's like why his approach or his way of thinking would be to treat DJing in the same aspect creatively to these other tasks that you have to do.
He said basically, rather than go 100% at just the one thing, drop it down to 80% and then give energy to lots of other avenues that you could explore, creative avenues within the industry. So maybe you're a DJ 80% of the time, but you use 20% of the time to dabble in videography, or you dabble in art or writing, whatever that other sort of passion is of yours, dabble in that, because where the intersection of those two things meet is where the unique point is. And that's why he's doing talks here, is because he found this unique angle of being a DJ but then being a writer and then creating good, very simplistic content that speaks to an audience, and that's nobody else is doing that. And that's where he found an audience, because he created something unique, and that was the biggest thing, is finding that there's thousands of DJs out there, and it's finding how to be the unique DJ, and it doesn't just come from I'm the best at picking the right music. There's a lot of people that can pick the right music. And there's also a lot of people that are very talented as DJs. But what's the other thing you attach to it to make yourself unique? And that's what he was trying to get across, is explore. Use 20% of your time to explore that other creative endeavor that could become something as part of your brand or identity or passion or outlet.
One of his other squares, which leads on nicely, I think is we need more DJs. And what he sort of explained it or broke it down to was, the true essence of what is a DJ, is fundamental core, is you having a love of falling in music, being sort of in your bedroom, immersing yourself in this art form and just listening to music. He was getting it from like a.
Saying, it's not
like we need a world of Carl Coxes. He was like, what would you rather have? Like more people
just listening on Spotify and feeding the algorithm.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Or would you rather have more people actually playing with your music and like experimenting with it and mixing it with other tunes that maybe other tunes of yours?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
you want the algorithm I'm just going to soak in and absorb your music. Let people play with it, and that's what he's saying. Like, we need more DJs, and that consumer market of DJs, like, we should be championing that, because that means that it's not just putting all the power in Spotify.
Yes,
it's putting the power in the creators and the curators, every person who enjoys music, and it was a really good point. I thought.
Just before we sat down, I saw a post shared in our Crossfader Slack channel about this event in Manchester doing. It's basically a lineup where they don't announce the lineup. There's no phones allowed. And it's £5 a ticket.
So you don't know what you're going into.
And I think this sort of plays into it. It's like there is a big sort of swing of we've sort of had enough of this, peacocking and Rosses and the ticket prices are this, and there's phones, and enjoy yourself and immerse yourself. That there's so much action towards no phones in a crowd and being immersed in experience, having this authentic interaction that happens. And it's like, I would love to buy a ticket, not knowing who's on, and then turning up. I think they had Sally C and I think Hannah Wants or something. Big.
Yeah, they've had big festival headlines there.
But you're like, oh my god,
SG Lewis was one of them.
Oh, was it? Yeah. So like, it's stuff like that. Like, and going back to that, we need more DJs. It is the sort of essence of not the algorithm DJ, the DJ who is like we mentioned about the South African DJ, like going and finding the guy who is in the community, listening to the songs that aren't out there from his mates who are making them, and then playing them to a wider audience of people who are interested in it.
That's it.
We've got one more day left to go. We're going to try and basically do an episode of people who are here that know Crossfader. We've got really no plans for it, but we thought we'd bring you the information sort of as it happens. And I think, I mean, look at this again. This is absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I am probably burning and melting at the same time.
I reckon we're just at the point where the music goes on. The DJs are on behind us. We're going to go listen to a talk about drum and bass, I think, unless it's finished. And then we're going to go get in the mixer, take advantage of some free beers, and then hopefully
Pikes tonight.
Have some more, to the legendary Ibiza Pikes, to see a few of our friends who are sort of mixing about and DJing here, and do a bit more mingling. So the more content we can bring you from here, we will do. And thanks for watching.
I want to say thank you to all the regular listeners, but also any of the listeners that we've met out here who are listening to this in the future. It's been great to meet you in person, and it always is nice to meet students or just followers or listeners, regardless of what you are. To Crossfader, it's always nice to chat to you, so thank you.
And if anybody has a house out here that will allow us to live here for 6 months of the year in winter, that'd be amazing. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.
Peace out.
Bye.